Charles LaPierre co-developed a human rights information system for Benetech and also works on Bookshare, which is one of Benetech's major projects. What's really cool about this guy is that you talk about accessibility. Charles knows accessibility. He actually invented an accessible GPS system that is now in use around the world. He also co-chairs the W3C Digital Publishing Interest Group and also is on the new EPUB 3.1 Specification Accessibility Task Force as well. So Charles is here to talk about accessibility in the trenches, and I think he will do an amazing job.
So Charles LaPierre, I'm the technical lead for Diagram and Born Accessible at Benetech. So just a little bit of background here. I'm sure you all know about the World Wide Web, W3C. They're the standards body for HTML5, CSS, ARIA, SVG, MathML. And then you have the WAY initiative, and then the guidelines, the WCAG 2.0 specification. And then alongside that, you have the IDPF, or you had the IDPF. That was the EPUB specification holders. And EPUB is designed, as most of you already know, on web technologies. So same thing, HTML5, CSS, ARIA, etc. So recently, this past January, the IDPF and the W3C have merged. So the last 3 years, I've been on the Digital Publishing Interest Group, and I was co-chair of their accessibility task force, and we actually noted gaps in the WCAG guidelines, that there's things that is important for digital publishing that is not present. So we created a note and produced that last year, showcasing these shortcomings. And now the EPUB is now merged and now part of the W3C, and so they'll basically be able to move that forward. So the adoption of W3C, EPUB 3.1, has been outstanding in a lot of digital publishing sectors. 3.1 is the brand new specification that was approved in January, and included in that is the first ever EPUB Accessibility 1.0 specification for conformance and discovery is key here, requirements for publication. And so this is basically drawing a sand. Everyone wants to know, how accessible do I need to make my books? This is it. That specification lays it out as a baseline, and actually it really only says that it has to be WCAG A compliant. But in the US, there's a lot of legislation being put in. There's the 508 refresh. That's going to set the bar even higher, and that's going to be at a WCAG AA standard. So we're looking into that. And we're going to, this baseline, this Accessibility 1.0, is continuously going to be improved on over the next few years, and the baseline will just keep getting higher and higher. So it's important here that we want practical, that publishers should be readily available, able to produce accessible EPUBs in their normal production pipelines. So creating a born accessible, like we heard yesterday from the beginning, the earlier you can get it into your pipelines, the easier it's going to be, and the end result is going to be so much better than doing any retrofit. It always costs at least 10 times longer if you have to retrofit and make accessibility as a bolt-on after the fact than at the beginning. Another module that that's right now under review is in the ARIA 1.1 module that the Digital Publishing Interest Group created this module for digital publishing. And in that, we've added a lot of different new roles that will help tag the content that was missing in just normal HTML markup. And I've listed some examples here of abstract, appendix, chapter, introduction, and there's a list of over 40 in that. It's currently under review, and we're hoping that once the 1.0 specification gets adopted by the W3C, that will become realized as well. So some of the baseline features for accessibility. Requires accessibility conformance in EPUB specification. Builds on WCAG 2, as I mentioned, with additional publishing-specific items in place as well. Uses WCAG single A, but double A is recommended. And there's an actual metadata in there that says conforms to, which will point to either the single A, double A, or triple A, hypothetically, if anyone could reach that level of conformance. Interestingly, publishers are actively participating in these EPUB standards and accessibility specifications and bringing that information back to their pipelines, back to their conversion vendors, to the authors, and letting them know what is in these baselines and getting information on how to make things accessible. So here are some concrete musts. All headings must be marked in HTML as headings. This is crucial for navigation. All textual content must use HTML text markups. Examples are paragraph, block quotes, list items, etc. All content must be in logical reading order. We've heard that a number of times over the last 2 days. Images marked as either decorative, described in the surrounding text or captions, or have alt text. And I'd actually like to see that being pushed further and have extended descriptions, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And if you want fancy headings and use an image, remember to surround the image with heading markup, use alt text, and remember, as Dave Kramer and others have showed yesterday, you can do a lot of cool stuff with CSS these days. So the metadata requirements in order to be compliant. EPUBs wishing to be conformant must include accessibility discovery metadata. This includes the new proposal to schema.org in their 3.1 release, which is about to be released any day now. And this includes access mode, accessibility feature, accessibility hazard, and accessibility summary. Now, feature and hazard was already part of the old specification as part of schema.org. We've added actually 4 new accessibility metadata tags. Access modes is this textual? Is there any visual elements? Is there any audio? Those things that are core to the book have access mode, and then what's not required, it's not a must, but there's others, access mode sufficient, which says what is sufficient that a person has any type of impairments need to do in order to comprehend the entire book. So if there's some visual elements in the book, but they're described, then access mode sufficient would say that it is textual, that all you need is to be able to access the text to digest and understand that book. Accessibility summary is really, that is a human narrated summary. So this is something that could be added, shown on a book, and you can find out the accessibility shortcomings or where they excel, and it's the authors, the publishers can put in their summary that this complies with, that all of the tables, for example, in this book have headings, but maybe in the appendix that there's some tables that they weren't able to describe correctly, or some images in the book. So they can really tell you exactly where it shines for accessibility, and maybe point out that it didn't quite meet the bar in these areas. And so we'll leave it at that. So, how to accelerate publisher adoption? Certification of EPUB publications. Publishers can self-certify, and I'm sort of saying that's great, but I would rather see a third-party certification program put in place instead of self-certification. I understand why publishers might want to do this, but in the US, we've had this whole VPAT that wasn't very useful. They just keep stamping the same thing without actually looking at it, you know, and an old saying, would you want the fox guarding your hen house, right? So having third-party, non-partisan to actually look at these books and manually inspect these books to know that they're certified correctly, that's what we're pushing here. And automated tests, DAISY is actually creating, they got a google.org Impact Challenge Award, and they're creating an accessibility certification checker. But this is based on HTML checking technology with a few other digital publishing, like logical reading order and making sure that everything's accessible. Now, that can only test between 20 to 30% automatically, where that's going to then highlight other areas that need to be manually inspected. So, and have an actual human look at this code, dig into it, and make sure, and test it with current AT technology that's out there. So, accessibility metadata required to present, needs to be present in the EPUB package. So, accessibility metadata supports, you've all heard Born Accessible, which was actually coined by our president, Betsy Bowman at Benetech back in 2012. Find Accessible, that's the metadata that can be accessed, and Buy Accessible. So Benetech's pushing all of these three initiatives. So Born Accessible, certified by Benetech. Benetech is piloting a certification process based on that 1.0 specification by the IDPF and now in the W3C. It's a documented process to certify what certification must be established and followed. Publisher materials are reviewed and remediated, and that information is then sent back to the publisher for long-term improvements with their production pipelines. So we're already seeing that the feedback that we're giving publishers when we get their next set of books has a lot of those things already fixed. And so that, you know, once you fix it once, anything else coming afterwards already has that in, so that makes everything a lot smoother for you and for us. Find accessible metadata, right. So here, there are 4 main pieces on how to find accessible. The first is, and this is all metadata that's inside the EPUB book. You have certified by, specifies the name or the third party that has certified the book. Can be self-certified, but we're also, and then also saying that it can be third party. Now the certifier credential, that is going to be something that is currently in the process of being worked out with DAISY. And this is going to be some type of badge that says this organization has proven that they are not only using their accessibility checking automatic tools, but then have defined a process in which they have manually are checking the rest of the book for accessibility that cannot be tested automatically. Like, for instance, is the image descriptions that is provided real and not just made up, or some random text be put into the alt text like image or illustration, for example. So that's the certifier credential. Then there's the certifier's report. This is going to be a report that I believe is going to be machine generated with maybe even a link to to a more extensive report potentially, and that will also be inside of the OPF file. And also, what level of conformance does this book conform to? Which points right into the 1.0 specification at either WCAG level A, AA, or AAA. And we're saying that procurement offices must focus on Buy Accessible. Buy Accessible, demand certification by third-party credentialed agencies, and to look for the Certified by Benetech initiative. Currently, Benetech is working with Macmillan Learning, who's here today, and a number of other publishers and a conversion vendor. As I mentioned, we're doing a very in-depth evaluation of multiple ebooks from each publisher and vendor, and giving an accessibility report, and then working with them to remediate, telling them what they've done wrong, what they've done right, and really praising them as well on things like if they've really went out of their way to do extended image descriptions. We definitely call them out on that and say, you know, great job, you're doing perfect. And by the way, these are some areas that need a little bit of work. So here we have a sample, a hypothetical summary. And on here we have poor Mr. Wile E. Coyote with raising a sign saying, help. The title of the book was Roadrunner, Not a Myth. And the publisher, Acme Incorporated, and the author was Mr. Wile E. Coyote Sr. And in here, we specifically look at the package metadata, which he's failed, the page and publication, which he's failed. Page navigation, he passed. He got from one page to the next, yay. But no, the media overlay playback, completely inaccessible, and overall 1.0 compliance has failed. You see here, there's also a Born Accessible score of 25.5%, and I'll get more into that later. And overall WCAG compliance reach, well, obviously fail. And this is something to point out. We're also at Benetech putting in an EPUB complexity score, because having a book that's, say, 80% Born Accessible score, and another book that's 60%, but one book is really complex, heavy STEM, you know, mathematical equations, complex tables, and the other is a trade book that just has simple text. Well, obviously, the simple textbook, you know, is probably going to be easier to get a higher score than a very complex mathematic book, for example. So this is some of the areas, something that we're trying out right now, working with the publishers, seeing what they think. And this is why this is a pilot. We're experimenting and just sort of see what everyone likes. And then we dig in a little deeper here, and we actually go into the image accessibility, audio accessibility, video. Did they do the HTML tagging correctly? General accessibility, such as we saw yesterday, the emphasis and strong versus bold and italic. Language, if it's declared in the metadata correctly, and if there's any language shifts in the book, like we also heard seen yesterday, that they're tagged correctly. Links that they're linking to, and that you know what you're linking to, so that a person just doesn't hear an HTTPS address and has no idea where they're going to go once they, you know, so you want a real description of where you're going to end up. Tables, are they marked up correctly? And if they're complex tables, is there a summary? Notes, is there any JavaScript? And if there is JavaScript, does it make anything inaccessible? If there's MathML, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And then there's some optional metadata that for accessibility, like I mentioned, that access mode sufficient and a few others. And I'm putting in here future ARIA, the DPUB ARIA module. If that gets approved, we'd like to start seeing those tags start showing up in EPUBs. So we're showing, we're basically helping the publishers to get ready for the future. And again, our Born Accessible score. Now this Born Accessible score is a Benetech score. We're weighting different things that we feel is crucial for accessibility, like image descriptions, tables marked up correctly, and we'll weight those heavier than other things that may not be as critical. Nice to haves, but maybe not as critical. So that all weighs into the whole Born Accessible score at the end. And here is what we lovingly call our Christmas tree slide. And before everyone starts yelling at me that it's red and green and color blindness is a problem, I've bolded all of the different, anything that has a green. So at least there's something here as well. I probably could have picked some other colors, but everyone at Benetech loved it. So some of the things to point out here, and I might have to get a little bit closer to my monitor because I am also visually impaired and low vision. But you can see most things have failed certification here at 64% for the overall score. And these are just the averages in the bottom in the yellow, okay? We call out the number of images, the number of tables, so we're seeing a lot of images in these books that and each one of these sections that you see separated by a blue line, these are, and there's 5 different publishers or conversion vendors in here. We've removed all identification. We don't want to single anyone out. But on here, you'll see that image accessibility, for example, is 48%, so not very great. A lot of publishers are not doing that. There's a few that have, and actually some of these books that have come back afterwards as a secondary, which is not reflected here, they've actually improved their accessibility, and some point to the point where we were pretty impressed with what we're seeing coming back. Let's see, HTML tagging was done very well, usually. A lot of people got close to 100%, if not 100. General accessibility was a little bit lacking. Which was done well was usually language and navigation, not too bad. Links, done very well. And tables, not so much. That was also very poorly represented as well. So, but we're, again, working with the publishers and telling them how to improve these. So now, here we have just some of the feedback that we give back to the publishers. So for decorative images, fancy images placed at the start of each chapter, having alt equals image. Well, that's just a no-no. It should instead be alt equals quote, quote, and marked as role equals presentational. And actually, as a safety, we even say that you should add in aria-hidden is true. And the reason for this, technically you shouldn't need both role equals presentational, and there's a lot of different reading systems out there, and not all of them behave similarly. And if you do both of these things, you are widening your chances that those images won't be called out to the user, which they shouldn't be. Longer descriptions. And we're saying here that there are 13 images and graphic text as images with no descriptions. So we're basically telling the person what the issue is there. Landmarks, if there's no EPUB type semantics, so we want to see that. So chapters, title page, footnotes, etc. Color contrast, which was brought up a number of times already today and yesterday. For WCAG AA, you need a 4.5 to 1 ratio, and for the theoretical AAA, that's 7 to 1. So having those contrast ratios, and there was talk yesterday of color pickers and things to help you with this. It's in the HTML, it's the same technology. So if it works on HTML5, you can actually explode your EPUB book and check it yourself with a like HTML code sniffer, and it'll tell you where the pages are have the incorrect color contrast that will fail the certification before we even see it. Inline styling, like we said, emphasis in bold instead of using the italic or strong instead of the italic and bold. Page lists, and then saying here, that they need to be declared in the OPF, and if there's a print equivalent, that you also have the DC source in there. Table feedback. Are the tables marked up correctly? No table headers. for the first row or column. Usually, the header must be included to help assistive technology navigate from cell to cell. And for complex tables, a table summary, and so it's calling that out. And definitely don't use tables for presentation, use CSS styling instead. So here's an example of extended image description. This is the current solution, okay? And here we have a figure with an image, and then inside the fig, and you'll notice here the aria described by is what we're using for the extended description, and we have this ID of Pyth details. Now in the figure, you'll notice that in the captions, right, you'll see that there's an aside with class equals hidden, so that's just saying that it's going to be invisible to the user, and that's done in through CSS. And it also has your same ID here with the definition of the Pythagorean theorem and c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Now, this is the only solution currently that we have that works, and we've seen some publishers actually putting this in their books. The problem with this right now, and there's nothing we can do about it, AT, the screen reader, will just read that entire description as one chunk. They don't have a chance to stop it, start it, review word by word, it just as one thing. So if you have this big, huge, long description of like the Mona Lisa or Starry Night, like was mentioned, that goes on for a paragraph or two, they're just going to hear that all at once. That's what we're left with right now. But this is the future solution, and this is an ARIA 1.1 new effect that ARIA details that we have proposed, and it's currently under review, and hopefully this will get adopted. So in here, same idea, it's very similar, and this is actually using the HTML summary details, but in here we have the ARIA details, same ID, and in the details we have that ID in there. But in the summary now, you could actually have the same content, but now a screen reader can actually go in and dive in and they can really understand that word by word, or just have it read to them correctly. So that's key, is to not only have it available to the screen reader, but also be able to navigate within it. All right, table markup. Table is one area that we've seen a lot of accessibility concerns. We would really like to see the table summary here, especially on complex tables. And here you can see, I just gave a made-up example, which in the first row, we actually have our table header. And that's just, just TH for table header, and we have just a 3-column salad entree and desserts, and then below that, that's your main content, with just your normal table TD table row designations here. And so with the AT, as you move from cell to cell, if you have that table header marked, it will actually say entree and then chicken divan, or dessert and chocolate mousse. So it really, without the person having to go to the top, remember, okay, I'm in this column, go down, this really helps for AT, so that's crucial. All right, yesterday I saw a presentation that was talking about MathML, and everyone's trying to figure out what to do. This has been a long, outstanding problem. I know that the W3C doesn't have any recommendations. Even our accessibility task force in the IDPF, before we merged, in that 1.0 specification for accessibility, we didn't have a technique or a guideline to say how publishers can put math into their books. And we've been working on it. We just had a code sprint at CSUN last month. And this was one of the topic areas that we spent the afternoon on. We thought we had a solution, and then when we tested it with the current screen readers and reading systems, what was happening was even though it was reading the alt text, even though we had aria-hidden on the image, it would read the alt text and then would read the MathML as well. So you got double speaking. So the Diagram Center, working with a number of experts, it actually was after cocktails that same evening, had a few drinks, and ideas started flowing, and we think we have a solution. So, and we actually have another scheduled meeting in next week, and that is to have two different approaches. One where you can have JavaScript in your EPUB book, and one when you can't have JavaScript in your EPUB. If you can't have JavaScript, you would strip that out before it goes to the Kindle or to whatever pipeline that doesn't allow for JavaScript, because not all of them do. And therefore would either remove also any MathML or have that hidden and have the alt text, have the image, preferably SVG if you can use SVG, because that can be scaled for low vision, and the alt text describing that math equation. When JavaScript can be used, we're going to actually create this JavaScript that we will share with publishers through the Diagram Center at Benetech. And you'll be able to take that JavaScript, put it in your book, and based on the reading system, it will detect the reading system, the reading environment that the book is being launched in, and will either make the image with its alt text the primary, or flip it on its head and make the MathML with the image hidden and strip out the alt text so it doesn't double speak. This is, fingers crossed, this is going to work. We're going to be testing, we're going to create some sample books, and then we're going to pass this along to epubtest.org, and we have a number of people that will then start testing this made-up EPUB book with the JavaScript in it to see what the results are, and hopefully we will have a complete end-to-end math solution. Let's see. So it's important to note here that if you need the alt description for the MathML, that mathmlcloud.org, which is a Benetech project, has you can go to that website and plug in MathML, ASCII Math, or LaTeX, and there's a lot of different options for SVG, PNG, MathML, and the alt text descriptions of that math equation. We also have APIs, so if you want to put it into your pipeline as well, to get those, any one of those, with the alt text included or not. And once we actually have this JavaScript, we might even put that in these APIs as well. So Macmillan Learning was kind enough to pass on their perspective of the certification program from their point of view. And so they, thanks to Rachel Comerford from Macmillan Learning for providing these. So this is their process for certification for accessibility. I won't go into too much detail here, but there's a number of different feedback loops all along the way, from right at the beginning, getting involved in the standards work, to creating their own sort of checklists and guidelines, and then going on to the vendor training, and then vendor testing, and then going from that to, what does it say? Vendor testing, and then manual testing at the end. And if any questions come up, it goes back over to their internal guide, and if that needs further clarification, they bring it back to the working groups. So they get involved in the working groups. It's a chance to share solutions and learn from each other. Standard groups provide the specification, but it was up to us to develop and implement these guides based on their own needs. Version 1 of their process took 6 months to build, and they're updating it every 2 months. And actually, we've been part of that process from the beginning, and we've been giving them feedback on their books, which is then helping them shape their certification pipeline and process. And they said that, yeah, they created their own checklist for automatic QA testing, and then getting that information to team members to start to look what they have to look for. And they go, I was very impressed to find out that they're actually going to the art and the design folks and the authors and telling them what they need to do to be part of this to help improve their whole pipeline. And editors communicate with the authors to focus on the development. Compositors, the applying these standards and giving feedback on any gaps, and then QA, quality assurance. So these were some of their concerns. These are some of their complexities that they're having issues with right now. Text with markup, complex image layout, marginal elements, MathML, well, hopefully we'll have a solution for them. ChemML, once we crack the MathML, then we can look into ChemML. That's a little bit, you know. I'm working. And a complete graphic novel, you know. So what do they do? Like, how are you going to make that accessible, all images? And so why are they doing this? Certified Benetech's advantages, third-party confirmation of accessibility standards, assurance for students and adopters, easy to roll up to administrators, giving feedback to pass on to vendors and the quality of their work, you know, provide internal confidence about the quality that they're delivering, help identify for schools what errors are addressed and what warnings are relevant, and most importantly, to show us what we're missing and what they have left to do. So here are a few resources that I've called out. They have the IDPF specification, the new 3.1, the new accessibility techniques 1.0 specification and guidelines, the WCAG, obviously 2.0 specification. Again, another shout out to the BISG's Quick Start Guide for Accessible Publishing. They've done some amazing work. I actually helped write part of that spec, or that guide. And then the Diagram Center. We have an image, Poet, the image training tool that we're actually expanding. And actually, I'm part of the Diagrams Technical Advisory Committee and Standards Group and the Developers Group. We're creating a repository to have that anyone can go to. If you need an accessible drag and drop widget, for example, for your EPUB, or that JavaScript for MathML, these are going to be open source in this repository that you'll be able to go to and look for what you need and grab the code and drop it in free of charge. So these are some of the initiatives that Benetech's working on right now. And thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, that was great talk. Can I ask, could you expand a little more on the Benetech certification stuff? That's really interesting for me. Thanks.
Sure. So the Benetech certification program, we're hoping to launch it by June, I believe, of this year. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what the current thinking is. We were actually partnering with a couple other agencies, one in the UK, the RNIB, so we're working with them, and I think Vision Australia as well. So we're trying to have this global certification program and sharing information with these other organizations. We're creating a website right now that, that publishers, procurement officers, DSS offices can go to in order to, for publishers to provide their books and to get certified, for these procurement offices to look for and find these books, and then what we'll have is how they scored, if they passed certification, or if they didn't, and the publisher still wants to publish the book, we can say that, it didn't pass, but and maybe in the accessibility summary why it didn't pass, for example. And then link out to where you can buy these books, be it Vital Source or wherever, or even back to the publisher, if they have a channel for that. So yeah, it'll be really to be able to find accessible, buy accessible, and links on how to have it be part of it and be born accessible for your content. So another thing that I would like to mention, it was mentioned I think yesterday about you could have the best EPUB book completely accessible, but if you put it into a reading system that's failing, has some flaws in it, then it's a really poor experience for the person, and it's just not accessible. So epubtest.org has a listing of all of the different EPUB readers out there right now, and they're constantly updating this, showing you how accessible and how it passes their basic accessibility conformance checking of this book. That doesn't have any of the advanced features, not MathML. It doesn't have even extended image descriptions. These are going to be put into a more advanced book, and those scores will start coming out in the next few months as well. So it's sort of a whole, network of information that you sort of have to find, not only find a great book, but then find a reading system that you can use to actually access that great material. So yeah. Other than that, the certification program, we haven't really figured out any numbers, what it would cost publishers and stuff. It's right in the infancy stage. We're still working out the template to figure out the weightings, and but stay tuned. In the next few months, we should have something up and running.